Okay, yeah, please rise and put your hands together to welcome our guest of honor and panelists for this evening. Miss Yeo Wan Ling, Member of Parliament for Pasir Ris Punggol GRC and Director of USME and Women and Family Unit. Ms. Tang Mei Ling, Chief Information Security Officer, Ministry of Family. Ms. Veronica Tan, Director of Safer Cyberspace Division, Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. Ms. Jessie Chong, Director of Marketing, Southeast Asia, Trend Micro. Our moderator for this evening is Ms. Sherlyn Lee, Vice President and Founder of AiSP Ladies in Cyber Chapter. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. So good evening to all panelists, AiSP mentors, AiSP mentees, students, and those who are joining us online. My name is Vincent, and I will be your host for this evening event. Before we begin the event proper, we will first like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsor and host, Trend Micro, for their kind sponsorship and hosting us this evening in their beautiful $3 million office. This event is also supported by Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore under the SG Cyber Women Ad Series, GovTech, Digital for Life, and initiative by the Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA in short, NTUC, and People Association. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over the floor to Shereen. Shereen is currently our AiSP Vice President and also the moderator for this evening. Shereen, please.
Thank you, Vincent, for the lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ms. Yeo Wan Ling, Member of Parliament for Pasir Ris Punggol GRC and Director of USME and Women and Family Unit. Ms. Tam Mei Ling, Chief Information Security Officer, Ministry Family. Ms. Veronica Tan, Director of the Safer Cyberspace Division, Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. And Ms. Jessie Chung, Director of Marketing Southeast Asia, Trend Micro. Fellow AiSP mentors and mentees and friends. And everyone who is here physically with us at Trend Micro's office, as well as those who are calling in via Zoom. Welcome to AiSP's International Women's Day 2022 and Learning Journey to Trend Micro. Woohoo! Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank Ms. Yeo for taking the time to grace today's event amidst your very busy schedule.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. It's really invigorating to be standing here today amongst all of you aspiring female cyber talents, and also an encouraging reminder of why the Ladies in Cyber Charter exists today and the impact that we are making in the community. And our nation and industry will need more passionate individuals like you as technology continues to rapidly transform digitally, where we play a stronger role in cybersecurity. And so I just want to say that as technology continues to rapidly advance, we will all the more need cybersecurity professionals that are from a diverse profession to deal with the diverse threats, because the threat actors out there are, from a diverse background. As industry professionals, we know that we are facing a massive talent shortage. And it's our belief that with greater female representation, that we can widen the pool of talents to tap on to address this manpower crunch. So with this objective in mind, AiSP actually started our charter in 2018. And it's run entirely by a huge group of very supportive female cybersecurity volunteers, with the aim to promote women's development, advancement, and inclusion in the cyber field. And today's session is just one of many ongoing efforts to attract and get more women to join cybersecurity. So I think why we exist today is really not so much to profile women because they're women, but really to profile the great work that all these amazing line of women can do. And by the way, they're female. Okay, so this is the objective of the charter. And what we hope to do at the end of the day is, it's not just about encouraging more women to join our industry. We're also looking to support those who are keen to pursue a career in this sector and help them succeed. Okay, so for those of you who are looking to pursue a career in cyber, I just want to end off to say, please stay true to your passion, stay relentless, maintain your tenacity with the right mindset and pursuit. You will be able to make it big here. And of course, you have to sell a bit of koyuk for AiSP. We have many platforms available, supported by industry partners like Trine Micro. They exist to broaden your knowledge of cyber, and they include mentorship programs, learning journeys and internships. So I urge you to seize these opportunities to develop your skill sets. And from this, I know you'll be able to succeed in this field. Fundamentally, it's not your gender, but your determination, mindset, and capabilities that will decide how far you go into this industry. And it makes me proud today to be able to invite 4 amazing women who are leading in their areas of work to join me to share their experiences with all of us. I would now like all of you to please join me to welcome this amazing panel. You put your hands together and welcome them. Thank you. Okay. So what we have done prior to this session is we actually approach all the IHLs and the schools to ask you to contribute questions to be put forth to be answered by these 4 amazing women. And so I'm going to make my rounds to ask the questions. Let me see. So I'm going to start off with Miss Yo. What would you say is the value of diversity in leadership?
Wow, what is the value of diversity in leadership? Actually, right, for me, I'm not sure if you know about my background, but I actually did quite a number of different things before I became a politician. So as you know, I am an MP now for Pasir Ris Punggol, and also at the same time, I work for our labor movement, the unions. So I speak up for workers, particularly female workers in the workplace. But prior to this, I was actually an entrepreneur. I ran a company called Caregiver Asia, and I had the pleasure of working with 12,000 women. Okay, 12,000 women, because that was the majority of the database that we had for people who were providing caregiving services as a profession. And prior to that, I was actually in EDB. I was in EDB for close to 15 years. And it was very different because in EDB, it was a little bit more male-dominated because EDB had a lot of engineers. So I might look very young, but actually, right, when I was in EDB, I was only in my 20s, right? And actually, during that time, we didn't have a lot of females who were actually engineers, right? And actually, my first job was actually in DBS. So I actually was a management trainee over at DBS, and I remember my first job was selling credit cards. Okay, so the reason why I wanted, to share with you, what my history was because I felt that all across these 4 places, right, I actually did benefit a lot from the diversity of opinions. And I don't think diversity should be seen, right, as whether you're man or woman. It shouldn't be seen whether you're a 40-year-old versus a 20-year-old. It doesn't even mean, right, whether you're a Chinese, you're a Malay, you're Indian, or you're an others, in our CIMO. But I believe, right, diversity comes from respecting people's opinions across the different walks of life that you have. I remember, right, that over in Caregiver Asia, I met up with so many different women. And all these women actually have stories to tell. Some of them, right, were actually nurses, okay, full-time nurses. But because they started to have children, they weren't able to cope with shift work, okay? And that's the reason why they fall out of the nursing practice and they take on freelancing work, even though they're paid less. Also at the same time, right, I meet women who tell me that, Miss Yo, I'm actually 70 years old, but I love children. I love children. And I feel, right, that, 70-year-old doesn't mean that you're weak. 70-year-old, right, actually means, right, you still have, if you're living 100 years life, right, you still have 30 years more, of a good life ahead of you. And that's why I want to come back, and I want to contribute. So it's actually listening to all these diverse, ways of looking at life, different ways of thinking about what work is, that allowed me to really create a platform that allowed people to connect with each other and to really look at the gig economy as a fantastic way for us, right, to be able to have our cake and eat it. I.e., if you want to work a certain number of hours, you work a certain number of hours. But it's also right, because when I heard from all these ladies, I heard about how sometimes when they go for a job, in someone's home, and they fall over a pet, a dog or a cat at home, because the work environment is different versus, let's say, a hospital, that I also felt that it is my responsibility as a platform to be able to protect our workers by buying insurance, professional indemnity insurance for them. So this is one of the 4 workplaces that I've worked before. And I must say, right, that talking to 12,000 diverse voices allowed me to have a better appreciation of what the gig economy is. And sometimes, right, you kind of not know where the road is going to take you, because I never expected that I'll become a politician, and I never expected that I'll join the labor movement. But one of the things after I joined the labor movement is actually now I'm on a work panel, a work group. It's an advisory committee for platform workers. Isn't that interesting? So I fight for the rights of people who work as drivers, the private hire drivers, the food delivery workers, because, right, a lot of times when they work for platforms, the platforms aren't as, I would say, fair as it would be, if you're a salaried employee. And I knew that from firsthand experience and 12,000 diverse voices from Caregiver Asia. So what I wanted to share with everyone here is that everyone's story, whether it's your classmate, whether, right, it is one of these amazing mentors that you have here, whether or not, right, it's the 大哥 down there, right, who is looking at the sound system, everyone has a story. And all we need to do is to sit down there and listen. Listen to their stories with, a good listening ear, with sincerity in our hearts. And the interesting thing is that it will allow you to come to certain understanding of what the workplace, what life is. And usually when this happens, the universe will come to you, and you will end up, right, being in another position where all these stories that you have heard will allow you to practice what you have learned in a new area, with a new opportunity. And I'm very sorry, this is a very, very long, answer
right.
to what your question was, and it's probably not what Kylie has prepared for me in my talking points. But looking at all the young folks here, I felt I needed to share this story. Because, right, the future, right, for all of you here, you're so young. Your future is so wide and so open. And I hope, right, that every one of us girls here, especially since this is International Women's Day, that we will have, the wideness of our hearts to listen to other people and get the diversity of opinions. No one's feelings or opinions is ever wrong, all right? Okay, bring those stories with you as you approach life. Because, right, you will be in a position to change something for some of the stories that you've heard. Okay.
Thank you, Miss Yu, for sharing. I thought it was very wonderful. The key thing that I picked out from that was about making a difference. And I love how your story was, in essence, sharing about the cause that you're fighting for, right? And I think, drawing back to why we're all here today and why the AISP Ladies in Cyber Charter exists, right? Is also to champion what we call meaningful work, And I'm sure that some of the ladies here in cybersecurity would agree that, cyber is a very different field, because I can totally relate to that. It is a very different challenge every day. And there's really something in the job where it's not just a job, but it's also that you wake up every day feeling like you can, whatever you're doing, right, is helping to secure the cyberspace and towards a more meaningful cause, right?
And what happens is that you're actually touching people's lives every
Yes.
single day because of the cause that you are after.
Correct. And I think that's really, truly wonderful, making a difference, right? And I think I urge all of you who are looking for a career to think about that, to reflect on what is meaningful work to you and what are the steps you can do to achieve that. And building on that, right, that point, I would like to ask you as well, what goals in terms of workforce diversity would you like to see more in terms of companies to help strive this forward? And perhaps what concrete measures you think can implement to move us in this direction?
Again, huh? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I pondered about this question because I played cheat lah. I got see the questions beforehand and I pondered about that question. And I actually feel, right, that maybe you won't feel it now because you're very young. Okay, but I fast forward, right, to 5-6 years later for you. Okay, some of you, right, would actually have families. All right, that's when you have your first child, your second child, your third child. And actually, that's where some of the issues that you will face, that a lot of other females, especially, I would say, right, you all of you look very young, lah, huh? But, but I was going to say, right, that a lot of females, right, especially in their late 20s and 30s, right, actually get some heat on. And that heat, right, is being able to balance, right, your duties at home with what you hope to do in the workplace. And I hope, right, that as a union, as a labor movement, I'm able to convince all the companies to be able, right, to practice a few things. The first one, right, is actually re-looking at the way that they consider work. All right? When I was growing up, our work, right, literally starts at 9 a.m. and it ends at 6. Okay? But I think for most of us here, the work doesn't really end at 6. The work ends at 8, 9, sometimes 2 a.m., especially if you're dealing with an overseas crowd. Okay? And work, right, always meant going to the office. I remember when my first job at DBS, right, I would have literally butterflies in my stomach if I was going to be late in the workplace. I remember, right, my boss, and his name was Mr. Saw, but I, as a young officer, we call him Dinosaur, was because he had a very, very, even at that time, a very, very prehistoric way of saying what work is. He believes you must come to work. If it's 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock. Because, right, if let's say you come at 9:01, and you have 100 people in your company, you would have lost as a company 1 times 100 minutes of productivity. And literally, that's when we would go there. This is DBS, okay? Literally, right, you have to key in at before 9 o'clock. Otherwise, at the end of the week, your boss will come to you and say, hey, this is your, tapping in. I'm very happy to say, right, that life is not so much like that now, lah. Okay, life is a lot better. I can arrive, right, at 9:30 and I'll still look in style. But life is always about constant improvement and change. Is that enough? Coming in at 9:30 and not having a stomach ache? No, not really. I feel, right, that is when, because of investments in technology, Trend Micro, your office is amazing. But I think it's also because there was a lot of investments into technology. What you see here, right, with that Zoom, that great Zoom TV and all that, these were all like rather recent, I would say, improvements. And all these will allow us actually to look at work in a very different way. Do you need to be in your office? Not really. So long as you can, do your work well. I remember my next job was actually in the EDB, right? Out of that 15 years in EDB, I did 11 years of remote work because I was posted overseas. My boss never saw me, right, for most parts of the year. But my boss also gave me, a fair appraisal. My boss knew I was doing my job well because at that time we had something called internet. Right? But now you have more than internet. You have a lot of apps, that was with internet and all that. So what I hope, right, the first thing is that we will be able to convince companies to really relook the way of traditional workplaces. It doesn't need to be at home, doesn't need to be in the office, doesn't need to be at 9. So this is something called flexible work arrangements. The second thing, right, that I think is important is that the culture of the company must change. Okay, which means this. Yes, because of COVID, now everybody is working from home. But I was just, asking the ladies, right, just now in the room behind us, I was asking them, hey, what are you going to do, right? If, let's say, I'm the boss and I have this lady here, she works from home, and this lady here, she works next to me in the office, and they're doing the same job. When it comes to appraisal, who do you think is going to get the better appraisal? Probably her, if my company does not have sharp HR policies. We need, right, to be able as a labor movement to get companies to come up with HR policies that will be fair to every employee in the execution of FWAs. So I think these two are very, very important, that I think, right, would actually help with, diversity and all that. And the third one, right, is actually offering ample opportunities to females. And the sad thing is that we did a survey before. Okay, so NTUC did a survey with actually the PAP Women's Wing. And that survey was actually on tech perceptions, women in tech perceptions. And I was stunned that the number one reason why both men and females thought why females cannot be in a tech career was the perception, right, from both men and women, that females were not good enough for tech. Boo to that, And so actually, this is what, 2022 already, right? I remember this is something that we were fighting against even like in the 1980s. In 1980s, I was still in primary school, and I remember, right, how girls can do everything. At that time, we were still struggling, right? It's maths difficult for girls. Imagine that. You're here already angry, right? I can tell you 20 years later, right, your children, when they hear, right, they say, right, oh, because women and men both think that, right, women not so good in tech, you will be angry also. And we need to fight against this gender bias. And therefore, right, I think this year's IW theme, right, is break the bias, right? Yeah. So I think, and it needs to start, right, with all of us here. Whether or not it is people who have been in industry for some time, your bosses, but I think the most important, it has to start with the youth. All right, you need to break the gender bias on that. Okay.
Thank you. And I guess maybe I'm quite lucky that I don't face that because I work in a company with a female CEO.
So do I.
Yeah, so, and we also supported with Trend Micro, whose CEO is also female, right?
Yeah. So we don't feel that much of biases.
Yeah.
Maybe
So-
that's the reason.
But I guess we see this changing, and I think totally aligned to your point, which is why I think it's very important, to continue to have members like you support such outreach events where we can posture, women, as role models, who are successful in areas of cyber tech and so on and so forth. And now I would like to move on to Ms. Tam Mei Ling to share your story. As a female CISO in the cybersecurity sector, can you share how your own career path has been?
Sure. But before that, I would like to relate to Wai Ling response that I'm a mother of 4. So you can balance your work, provided that the companies do have a very flexible workplace to allow you to take the necessary time off when you're taking care of children. That is something that is evolving, and I'm thankful that given the current situation that we are in, we really have unobstructed access to education. And in terms of the career workplace, it's a much more fairer place. There is no biasness against women in terms of career progression in the workplace that I'm working in. Thanks to GovTech and Ministry of Environment and Sustainability. Okay, so back to the part that I'm doing my career. So actually what I did is that I started off as the project management in IT development. Okay, after years of doing code development and system rollout, it just suddenly struck to me that the common practice of leveraging of common libraries and code to develop our systems, is it considered a security risk to the system that we roll out? So that was actually the aha moment that turned me off to start thinking, maybe I should read up more about cybersecurity. And that was a shift curve from where I am, from project development to cybersecurity. After which, I actually hop on to become the security consultant to look out for abnormalities activities and subsequently manage security events in security operations center. So I'm actually quite well versed of those services that's provided by SOC. Okay, what happened next is that because of the role that I'm playing in SOC, it deepened my technical knowledge as a digital forensic investigator. With that knowledge itself, it helps me to recover related data, malware, and evidence in those mobile device, your handphone device, and together with application systems and servers. One leading to another, I move on to the governance role, where I help to formulate cybersecurity policies, procedures, and guidelines. Because once you have some deep knowledge, right, you can actually translate that into policies which is relevant to the organization operating environment. See, that helps a lot in doing that. Then what I do now has a role of CISO in Ministry of Sustainability and the environment, not MSF has pronounced it now, MSC. It actually helps me to charge the cyber and data security strategy, goals, and action plan for Ministry HQ and together with the supporting agency comprising of PUB, SFA, and NEA. So that is actually my road or path that I move on from the time that I do Security Operations Center to a forensic, to governance, and now has a CISO. So it's a diversity of path that you can have for cybersecurity. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many disciplines in cybersecurity that you can add on, and it meets the different interests that you may have. It's not just that you need to be in comm science in order to do cybersecurity role. Any of the discipline that you're in, as long as you have the key interest in IT, participate in all the activities that is current on, join on the workshop that involved cybersecurity so that you can have a sense of what it takes to participate in different revenue of cybersecurity. And that will actually give you the path of what you want. And at the same time, join those security seminars that, for example, AiSP has. I saw the programs. It's fantastic, no? I come advertisement for y'all. Do well. It is really very good. So with that in mind, right, you actually can expose yourself to see what is good for yourself and what you're interested in. That is something that I will advise all our women here to participate. And by the way, Happy New Women Day. It is a day to congrats ourselves that we are here today with the achievement that we have now.
Thank you, Mei Ling. And I totally echo what you mentioned about cybersecurity having diverse roles, because I think one of the common things that I hear when I speak to young people, right, is that they think of cybersecurity as hacking. But as Mei Ling actually brought up very nicely, right, you know, her broad spectrum of experience from consultancy, you know, all the way to even security operations, there's actually a breadth of different roles available in cyber, and, you know, be it through product development, product management, you know, technical pre-sales, and so on and so forth. So I guess the main thing is whether you have the mindset and you're interested, and like what you said, you know, participate in more of our events and get to learn more. So I would also like to ask you, Mei Ling, if you can share any exciting projects you worked on in your role that you feel has really made an impact to our community or industry.
Cybersecurity is very broad, right? Beside the IT security work that I'm doing as normal, I'm also involved and exposed to many interesting and diversified industry control systems for SCADA. Some of the projects that are involved in examples of incinerator plant, waste management plant, meteorological systems, water treatment plant, and water reclamation plant. So these are some of the examples that will expose me to the different industry control systems. Although these industry systems are not typical IT systems, but it does leverage on IT operating environment to manage the various plant facilities. Hence, they are also susceptible to all the cyber threats. That's something that we need to be very wary about. And the fact that they are critical infrastructure, it makes it more tempting to be part of the cyber attack targets. You can really see the past history where Starknet actually attacked Ukraine power grid. At the same time, how the various black energy is been doing to the market. So these are things that we need to make sure that our critical infrastructure are being protected to prevent ourselves losing all the essential services. That's some of the experience that I have as part of my job.
Yep. So absolutely very great points brought up, because you know, many people think of cybersecurity just as IT systems, but as you know, Mei Ling has actually pointed out, right? In a typical cybersecurity IT system perspective, you know, maybe it's about data loss, or, you know, prevention of having your crown jewel stolen. But in the sense of SCADA or ICS, right, you're talking about potentially lives that could be lost in such a situation. So I suppose you could say that there's a lot of meaning and a lot of pressure points, to a certain extent, but totally meaningful. And now I'd like to move on to Ms. Veronica Tan, Director of Safer CyberSafe Division from CSA. So for women already working in the cybersecurity sector, what advice would you give them to help them progress further in their careers?
So I think I'd like to suggest 2 tips for everyone here. I think earlier on in the conversations, people talk about a bias. People talk about being in a fairly male-dominated field, and I personally think that it's quite true. We have seen studies that show that today there are only about 30% of women in the cyber industry, and that is considered good because the year before this survey was done globally, it was 24%. It also means that actually we are generally a bit on the minority side, and sometimes this actually inhibits us from speaking up. So I would encourage all of us here to be a bit more thick-skinned about it. Let's be confident about ourselves and have the capability and have the confidence to speak up when we think that we need to do so. And the reason why we are able to do so is that we can actually make use of our so-called womanly strength. Now, all of us, men and women, we are all different and we have different strength, right? And if you look at cybersecurity, I would say there are many challenges in the industry. One of them is that there is a very low end-user awareness of what cybersecurity is, what it means, and why do businesses need to even invest in cybersecurity. So if we are women and women are generally stronger communicators, I think this is where we can actually use our womanly strength to be able to communicate the importance of cybersecurity so that the end users who don't understand this so-called chim topic can actually understand why it makes a difference to them. The other study, there are some studies that show that in EQ tests and so on, women do tend to be more resilient than men. Now, if you look at the cyber industry, I think a lot of resilience is important because the threat landscape is changing. The type of threats that we're getting basically is increasing in intensity in different types of patterns, and it's actually a very adverse environment. So if we are more resilient in this, I think this is an area where we can actually persist and be able to actually hang on to it and deal with the situation. So I would say let's turn our womanly strength into an area that can actually channel confidence as we go about doing our work. And this way, we will not feel out of place or, basically outspoken simply because there's so many other men in the industry. It is male-dominated, but I think there is definitely room and space for us as women to be able to contribute, make a difference, and basically, I think, do a lot of good towards this industry that needs a lot of talent and people.
Very nicely put, Veronica. And I would say that, being a woman and being few is a differentiator in my point of view, okay? So, and also, if you could give advice to the cyber enthusiastic women listening in to us today, what would it be?
Okay, so I think that's where, again, I think leveraging on what we discussed earlier, a lot of the diversity matters. So I think really get out there and network with different people in order to learn from them and basically grow your circle. So some of them could be cybersecurity practitioners, thought leaders, and people who talk about this topic. As you get to know them and you hear what they say, I think you will be able to grow a very strong wealth of knowledge and accumulate this to help you in your career. The other thing is probably, I think, a bit more on the technical or the hardcore skill sets. Cyber is a very interesting field because in one way, you can consider it mature. The frameworks are there, the certification schemes are there. But what is exciting about this is that every time a new technology comes up, the nature of cybersecurity changes. Earlier on, the mailing talked about OT networks. So traditionally in the past, OT was basically mechanical systems and they didn't really talk to IT networks. But over time, OT networks, operational technology networks, converge with IT networks, and suddenly some of the cyber incidents that you see in the IT network is starting to creep into the OT networks. And that's why there's now a need for capabilities in understanding cyber, understanding OT, and putting this together. This is just one example. AI is another example. So with AI, and it's been around for like 50 years since the very first workshop, when people start applying AI, we start to see actually new threats, new dangers that didn't exist before without this context. So again, if you combine cyber with AI, another exciting field. So I think the thing about cyber is that it's in a way fairly mature. A lot of the things that we need to do are cyber hygiene, but as you apply them into different technology areas, electric vehicles, AI, OT networks, there is a new flavor that emerges, and we really have to keep up with the fast-changing, developments so that we can keep pace and up to speed and be able to then stay abreast of everyone else.
Thank you. And now we move on to Ms. Jessie Chong, Director of Marketing for Trend Micro. How will the gender gap in the cybersecurity sector exacerbate the cyber risks that organizations face?
So let me clarify the questions a little bit and my point of view on that. Firstly, I think the gender gap does not really exacerbate the cyber risk that the company is facing, because this is not about the men's and the women's. However, I do have 2 points that I want to make with the audience here as well. I think the first thing is, if you look at the skill set shortage in cybersecurity, I think that is prevalent. There is some things that really happenings. According to organizations called Cybersecurity Ventures, this organization basically they track the unfilled cybersecurity professionals role for consistency 8 years. So in 2013, the unfilled cybersecurity role in the market globally is about 1 million. But in 2021, the unfilled cybersecurity positions is actually increased by 350% to 3.5 million. There is a huge gap that we need to fill in cybersecurity. And then there is a huge gap that I see we as women need to take some responsibility on that, because right now, globally, we only have 24% of the women working in in cybersecurity professionals, only 24% of them are women. And some statistics actually show in Asia is about 10% of them are women working in cybersecurity. So I do think it's time perhaps for us to really think about how can we step up and do more. And then the second point that I want to think is actually very well related with what Ms. Yeo have shared earlier. Like, we do have these stereotypes or unconscious bias, and I would call it unconscious bias to us ourselves, that in general, girls are not good in tech. But actually, I tell you what, that is not the case, because number one, we as a woman, sometimes we are too hard to ourselves. Like, sometimes I'm thinking I'm not good enough for myself, like, or I'm not good enough in certain things. But actually, you're doing pretty well. It's just that for maybe 10% of the reason or 5% of the reasons that you suddenly feel that, okay, I'm not too good in that. But as compared to our counterparts, in fact, males go a bit adventurous, because in some statistics say that in some job JD, if the men meet 60% of the criteria, they will say, I'm fit for the job. But for women, it's like, I need to meet 100% of the criteria, then I will consider I'm fit for that positions. So I think this is something that we can think about for ourselves as a girls and as a females and as a ladies.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And I totally align to that. You know, we should always walk with our head held high, and and be confident that we're not judged by our chromosomes, but by the work we do, right? So definitely on that part. What do you think you foresee are the new cybersecurity roles that young women can consider when they're looking for a potential career option for the future?
That's actually my favorite questions, girls. There are many interesting roles that exist in cybersecurity, but I would pick 3 that probably will benefit from Trend Micro Solutions. Sorry, marketeers. So the first role I would say is very interesting, is called Trade Hunters, and then we do see a lot of openings that exists in Singapore as well. A lot of companies actually looking for Trade Hunters, and this role is actually very interesting because what it does is it applies the new threat intelligence against the existing evidence to identify the attacker that might have already sieved through into the real-time detections mechanisms. So I think in layman term, it is a person proactively looking for the threat inside the network system, inside the entire IT system. So I do think this is interesting. And the other job that I do think is also interesting for all of you to consider. But let me reverse back a bit on the trade hunter role. I mean, the trade hunter role do need is an expert role. So when you step yourself into the cybersecurity, that probably you need few years to get into that role. So you can see it as like a career path for you. And then the other one is DevSecOps engineer. And this role is very important because what it does is really to ensure that the application, because nowadays we do a lot of apps. We use a lot of apps. And then we need to make sure that the app is being delivered safer. So what is this DevSecOps engineer do is basically they automate the cybersecurity capabilities and insert cybersecurity into the DevOps pipeline that the developer develops the apps while the developer is developing the apps. So that's also I see is a very interesting and dynamic expert role, because in this role you need to be expert in a few key areas and really leading the DevSecOps area in like vulnerability management, like security operations, security testing, and application security. And the last part, and the third role that I would think is interesting is called, I like it by name, purple teamer. It's like purple is a nice color. But actually, purple teamer, what the purple teamer does is in cybersecurity, like many of you think of cybersecurity, you think of hacker, right? Preventing hacker. So in cybersecurity term, they have this term called blue teamer, and red teamer. So blue teamer is playing a defender role, and the red teamer playing like a white hat hacker role. And this purple teamer, basically, they work to integrate these two red team and blue team together, bring them on the same platform to be able to speak the same language. Because the blue teamer, traditional blue teamer, what they're actually looking into is like security control. They look into vulnerability management, and then they look into the log source and things like that. Where the red teamer actually speak slightly different language because they are wearing the hacker hat, so they look into things like payloads, implants, and then they look into exploit. So this purple teamers is basically her role is integrate these two roles together and constantly help the company to elevate their cybersecurity posture. So yeah, and then I think this three expert role is really something that is really interesting. That if you are interested, I mean, we can chat more offline on what is this role about and how you can prepare yourself for this role. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for sharing. And I think the other experts here will also align that these are all the same kind of experts that we're looking for together, and we're fighting after in the same talent pool. But I also just want to add that maybe some of it might sound foreign, but if you're somebody that's, for example, already in networks or in engineering, right? You shouldn't be put off by all this kind of lingo, and really look at taking on some certifications, to help you bridge and enter. And I say this for a fact because from my company, from a personal standpoint, one of the things that we ever look at is we actually hire people who, from a mid-career standpoint, right? So the guy is a network engineer, and he actually took, I think, a year or two off just to study and focus in the cybersecurity. And because of his tenacity and passion, right, we actually engage him. You see, so it's there are many ways into the profession, I know. So not just when you're school going, and there are many paths. Okay, and we can chat offline about this more if you're interested. Yeah. So I think now we've come to the exciting part of the segment. This is when I open the questions to the floor. So maybe I just look around to see if there's any questions. Vincent is there holding the mic.
Support us a bit lah, ask a bit of questions.
Don't shine.
Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll try to kick get the ball rolling first and then ask a couple of questions first. Then maybe you can put up your hand later and you might feel inspired. Okay. So one question that we have is how can aspiring cybersecurity professionals enhance their skill sets while they are in school so that they can make a bigger difference when they enter the workforce? So I'm just going to open this to the floor.
Okay, I'm the only layman here,
Very good.
but from a layman's point of view, and I heard right what all the ladies had mentioned, I actually think right that cybersecurity is actually it's engineering, but I also think it's actually a social science. It's something right that you can learn anything you want in school, but actually it needs to have an application. And I believe, right, that with all the scams that's going out there now, with all the bad stuff that's going out there now, it's even more important that as you prepare to become a really good cyber protector, actually I'm so impressed by all the terms, the purple teamer, the threat Threat hunter. Wow, it's like bounty hunter like that. Actually, I also want to do, But anyway, I was just going to say, yes, for you to be able to relate and for you to be able to understand the work that you do and how you can actually go after all the bad guys, I think, right, you kind of need to be on the ground to know what's happening out there. And therefore, I think, right, as part of the preparation to become a really good cyber professional is actually you need to know the stories that's happening out there. It's maybe good for you to do a little bit of community work. Maybe it's good, right, for you to maybe even do your own like cool stuff. I know that a lot of people are doing their own indie documentaries now. So you actually go out and you talk to people who have suffered from certain things. You go and talk to companies. And because you're students, I'm very sure, right, that a lot of companies are more than happy to talk to you about the issues that they face. And once you have this and you got the real life stories, this will actually give you the extra content, the extra know-how when you're hunting that threat where
Exactly.
where that horrible person, right, is actually hiding. Really, I'm serious. It's actually a marrying, right, of tech, right, with social sciences.
Thank
the
you.
layman's point of view.
I think it's excellent. And thank you to one of the people calling in from Zoom. We have a question open to any panelists. With the cyber threat landscapes evolving rapidly and the need for more cyber warriors to join in defending Singapore and organizations, what can men do to support, encourage, and convince more women to take up cyber as a career so that they can also do equally or even better than men? I think this is a very excellent question. Thank you for sending this in. So I'm going to open this up. Would you like to take a stand at it?
Yeah, maybe I can take as a mother of four. Okay, first of all, I think the male has to convince the female that cybersecurity is not a tall wall. Actually, it's actually a long run. Okay, what it requires most is a passion, not based on gender. It requires a person to continue the journey to learn and to evolve because technology changes so fast and cyber threats are always evolving. It is not a job where muscular strength has the advantage. That's one thing we must be very sure. We may not be having that kind of strength that men has, but what we need to tell them that cybersecurity requires mental grit and resilience, which women has, but men may not have.
International Women's Day.
Yeah, happy International Day.
If I may just add on to that, I think I like the question because basically from a man's perspective, if you are working together with a woman, whether as a colleague, as a friend, basically show that support, that mental support, be the friend, the confidant, and basically encourage them. For your loved ones, for example, and I wanted to follow on with what Mei Ling said earlier, because when she said as a mother of four, actually, if you're a husband, or if you're the other half, and basically, your loved one is actually in this field, out working, doing threat hunting, or doing all the red teaming and stuff like that. Basically, give your other half, your significant half, basically that support, looking after the kids, doing the dishes and all that. it's tiring in cybersecurity, and sometimes it's useful to be able to provide that support. No matter what form of support that your other half needs it, this will be, I think, the best way of showing that support and helping the ladies in your life to be able to do well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually want to add one point, but I think that's a little bit maybe controversial, but I think easy to remember as well. Like, I would talk to the man, and in case any man is in this Zoom link and whatnot, and also the man here is like, really, when comes to working, and please don't treat us like, oh, this is woman, like, oh, these ladies or whatnot, because when it's come to work, it's all about work. It's not about genders. It's not about like, you are man, that's why I treat you differently, or if you are woman, I treat you differently. It's not this case, because I mean, when it comes to communications, of course, we need to have that sensitivities, but at the same time, it's really about talking objectively and really, treat us as part of you. If you are a team with 9 men and 1 woman, don't treat this woman special. And that actually helped the women to be her in her nature, like I can be the woman, but at the same time, I am your project team. I am your teammate. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Actually, right, hearing what you said brought a very good story to me. There's one more industry that's even worse than you know.
Really?
You know what that is?
Pray do tell.
Seafarers,
Oh.
sailors. Yeah, so there's actually a union, right, over at NTUC. It's actually called the Singapore Maritime Officers Union. I think, right, it is like 95% men and 5% females. And these females, their workplace is on a ship, which means, right, that they are out on ship with a majority male crew for at least 9 months at a time. But when I met, right, with our maritime females, you know what they told me? So it could be like in the crew, right, there's 100, right, and there's only 2 females, you know. So if the male, right, sailor come and say, I help you, no need, I do myself. And I think, right, this is what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah,
Exactly.
because treat us equally, don't give us special favors unless we ask for it lah. Yeah, unless we ask then please give us but otherwise, right, don't take it, right, to say that, oh, because we are weaker sex, we need protection. Actually, females, right, and girls, if you agree with me, right, after I say this, right, please say so, okay? I don't think girls need protection. But I believe, right, what protection is needed is that the opportunities that are out there for us, right, needs to be equal. Men and female. And our decisions, right, need to be protected. But we ourselves do not need to be protected. Correct? Yeah. All right. So, the seafarers.
Thank you to all the panelists for your wonderful sharing. Just because Vincent just reminded me that.
We got one more question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think last question. Because
Okay,
running out of
yes,
time.
we'll take one last question for the night.
Hello, hi, my name is Has. I'm from RP. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm very nervous.
Don't be nervous, it's okay.
Okay, so don't mind, I just read my question.
Sure.
As mentioned earlier about the fact that there are only 30% of women in cybersecurity, though the numbers are indeed increasing, it does seem a bit worrying for me because I feel that women will still be looked down upon based on the gender survey that you mentioned earlier. Yeah, so my question is, how can we progress in our career with this perception? And on top of that, having a family as well. Because what if my CEO in the future is not a female?
Okay, can I answer this? Because I got a story I'm dying to share with you. Dying, okay? And actually, Has, thank you so much for that question. Okay, so a lot of you would think wow, Wan Ling, she's like an MP and, blah, blah, blah. And she must have met with no issues in her career going up. No, I can guarantee you all 5 of us here has met, right, with some form of discrimination before, but it's how you deal with it. I remember, right, in one of the companies that I was working in, I was sent overseas and I was married at that time. Married, but I don't have kids, but I was married at that time. And that company, right, was it was a very long time, right, since they had sent a person on posting, a female on posting that was married. And I remember my HR director, who's a female, she came, right, and told me this, we're taking a chance with you, Your husband going with you, right? I said, yes. All right. Then she said, okay, we feel, right, that when you're overseas, because you need to take a lot of airplane flights, it's very stressed out, right? The minute you got pregnant, right, we are going to terminate your overseas posting. And now this is not 1980s or 70s or 30s, okay? This happened, right, in what, 2003 or 4? And I bet, right, all of you, eventually, actually men out there, you maybe next time also got discrimination. I mean, all of us will face some form of discrimination. And usually, right, two paths will open. One path, right, was for me to make a complaint, okay, and say that, hey, this is wrong that my director says this. But, right, I made a decision at that time. I went for the second route. The second route, right, is I'm going to show that you are wrong. I am going to show you as a married female, I go out there, I can do the job really well so that I will open the road for other females to follow. And so that's what I did. I believe, right, at that time, the decision I made, if I went, right, and complained to my management and all that kind of stuff, right, yeah, they will cite me, but I don't think I'll be posted at that time. I'll probably have to wait for a later posting or maybe not even posted. And I was true to myself because when I entered that organization, one of the clear things I wanted to do was to get posted out overseas. I wanted to enjoy a nice long career overseas because I wanted to experience diversity. And I'm very happy that I did it. And I'm very happy that after me, there were many other female married people who went out. And the last I heard, there was actually a female who got pregnant and didn't get sent back. And all of you need to do this for women. We need to be like water and we need to find the pathways to create not only for ourselves, but actually for all girls to follow in future. Okay, so now don't be scared, okay? In fact, right, you are having tailwinds. If let's say your number is dwindling, right, from like 25 become 20, 10 and 0, then maybe a bit worrying lah. But you're actually on the uptrend. And it's because you need to thank, right, the ladies before you, them who actually have done such a great job that they carve out the path for you. And it's your job, right, to make sure that the path, right, is even wider and clearer and longer. All right?
Very inspiring. Would any of you like to add on?
Okay, if you look at my career path that I'm working in, right, it ranges from operational to strategy, but it doesn't come just naturally. Well, I still have my twists and turns, having 4 children to manage and a different phase of life, they need care. But I think what matters most is that you try to adapt yourself to go for a discipline as part of the cybersecurity that is most suitable. Like for example, if your kids are young, you cannot work in security operations center because that involved working shift where, sometimes your kids may be sleeping, but you're still working. You may just choose a role where you do for DevSecOps, where you see whether it's application secure. So that itself will give you a normal working hours as your kids grow along. But of course, when your kids get older, then your interests warrant you to do part of the security operation job. Then go for it. I just want to cite an incident now for my son. He was actually going for some cybersecurity course. And as part of the interview, he was asked some questions, but I was outside, he was close to the door. He cited me as an example, as an inspiration example to say that, Mommy, last time when I was 12 years old, taking PSLE, she was not at home, she was fighting anonymous back in Security Operations Center. And I have to bear with it because she's protecting the nation. Can you imagine she's saying that? Wow, I'm so happy. But of course, he got into the course. But the fact that it has an inspiring fact, and because you are so transparent to share with your kids, you have to talk to your kids. You cannot just disappear in the air and they cannot see you on weekends. But before you leave, you do tell them, hey, I'm doing my national service. It's not just guys, but girls are doing that. So I need to do what is necessary to protect their interests. And because of this, I'll be away maybe at night, sleep well, but I'll be awake, but you are always in my mind. So these are the things that really bear with your kids, and at the same time, your husband will know that you're doing something. So naturally, because of the transparent discussion, they will actually assist you in areas that you think that allows you to do your job. And I think down the road, I don't actually dictate my kids to do cybersecurity. I have three daughter and one son. But in the daily hygiene that they're doing, especially nowadays teenage has so many devices, right? They have their handphone, they have their tablets, they have their computer. Someone have a few social media account, access to those shopping online. At the same time, they have all their PayNow, everything inside their laptop. So these are things that I make sure that they have the basic hygiene to protect these devices from potential scams and fraud. So as part of the natural kind of hygiene that you're building out, actually allows you to build your knowledge in IT security. That's why I actually wanted to add on to a part. It is not necessary that you have to be in cybersecurity to do interest and fruitful career in cybersecurity. Actually, what you need to do is to take a key interest in IT, okay, and participate those workshops that is held in AiSP, SCS. At the same time, skill future. Once you reach certain age, right, you will have money to engage certain course. So go for the courses that you have. At the same time, take interest in participating on cyber interest group, like for example, the Cyber Youth Singapore, and you can actually expose to different mentor and reach out to this mentor during the industry attachment and talk to them. So these are the various career paths that you really can do in order to have a feel of what the different discipline in IT and cybersecurity offers you. I think the path is diversified. There's a lot of opportunity there, but do step out. Do not just feel that because you're a woman, maybe you feel that, oh, my technological skill is not as well as the rest. It's not true. I think with internet going on, you really can read a lot of YouTube. And that makes a difference for your life. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we've, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for all the questions, both from home and, as well as live audience. We've come to the end of our segment, so I hand the floor back to Vincent.
So thank you everyone. I know some of you still have questions, but don't worry, after the session end, you can look for the panelists itself and look for them. So thank you everyone. We have come to the end of the AiSP Lady in Cyber Dialogue session. I'd like to thank Ms. Yeo Wan Ling, Mei Ling, Veronica, Jessie and Shireen for taking time off to join us this evening. We hope that everyone of you have enjoyed the session. So our next Lady in Cyber event. So our next Lady in Cyber event will be on 22nd March at Lifelong Learning Institute. So join Minister Josephine Teo in the Ladies in Cyber Symposium and hear from 4 other female leaders sharing the different aspects on cybersecurity. So you can scan the QR code to register. So before we end also, can we invite everyone for a group photo? So for those who are joining us via Zoom itself, you can just turn on your camera and then we can show it on the screen. Then for those who are joining us physically, we just need you to stand and face the back. Yeah. So for the panelists, can we also invite you to stand? The photographer will take from the back itself. Yes. Yes, you need to wear the mask. Thank you so much. Please. Oh, yes. Okay, so thank you everyone, thank you. So for the students, before you leave, we have some dinner bento. I understand that some of you want to take picture with Miss Yeo, and some of you have questions to ask some of the panelists. So, but let me finish my some of the regulation first. So before you leave this place, please ensure that you bring your goodie bag and all your items with you. There's also dinner, so you should turn there and see the McDonald's. Yes. But please note that no eating or drinking is really allowed in this office due to the current COVID situation. So you have to bring your food out and bring home to eat itself. Okay, you cannot eat in this place because no food and drinks is allowed. Then okay, now is the moment that I think you're waiting for. But before that, can I invite the panelists to take a good photo first before we take the photo in school? So we'll start from RP, TP, SP. Then after that, after the order. Sorry.